I'm a recovering addict, and my name is Phil. And I'm a small-voiced addict, so I'm going to stick very close to my friend here. Good to be at the Mountaineer Convention. I've heard a lot about you guys. Your reputation extends even as far as New York City. But I make a lot of conventions, that's what I do. And ran into somebody who came from here and was living in Phoenix, Arizona. And she put me in touch with Cooper. And here I am. And I had a great weekend, and I hope you have too. My clean date is January 20th, 1992. You betcha. I told Brittany I didn't want to be introduced. I don't believe in this newfound custom because what the introduction usually does is build a pedestal, and I'm afraid of heights. Yeah. The theme of the convention this one is the old lie is dead. And most of us know what that refers to. For those that don't, it's mentioned in the basic text that way back when NA was a gleam in Jimmy K's eyes, the whole idea of addicts, we were hopeless. There was nothing they could do for us. And the lie was, once an addict, always an addict, right? And NA transformed that. NA called it a lie and proved it. And here we are. We no longer have to face that kind of discrimination or prejudging of us. They know if they're listening that there's a place for us to go to proceed to have a good life. A great life, really. And that's what the theme of the convention is, that lies can die. Beliefs, old beliefs, we can let go of. And in my 34 years, I've made a lot of meetings. I've heard a lot of people share their story, our story. Our story is pretty much the same. And there are certain themes that I was listening to. I also have the special privilege of having been asked to hear several dozen fifth steps. And I've listened carefully. I want to talk today about what I've heard. And there are themes in our story, things like people pleasing. We all did some version of that. We want to be liked. We want to not upset anybody, not get anyone mad at us. And we do outrageous things. I know what I did. We could be talking about a topic or a situation that I felt very strongly about because I had some good beliefs, and when I'm talking to you and you have a different belief, and all my life before I got here, I would agree with you, when in fact I disagreed with you. My version of people pleasing, I would laugh at jokes that weren't funny. So that's one of the things I hear in our stories. We all seem to have put ourselves in jeopardy, at risk, beyond the obvious one. You know what the obvious one is? We put stuff in our body that wasn't exactly deemed safe by the Food and Drug Administration. But beyond that, we put ourselves at jeopardy by accumulating debt, and by putting ourselves in danger. I had this gig, this type of work I did, that allowed me to take vacations. And I went on the cheap and stayed in one-star hotels, but I went to countries known for the availability of drugs. That's how I picked out my vacation places. And I put myself in jeopardy. You understand. I think I don't have to go into detail. Now, the theme of our stories is we take jobs that we're overqualified for because we have low self-esteem, we don't know our worth, and we involve ourselves with people that we're overqualified for. We settle, in other words, one of our themes. And then we go ahead and stay past the expiration date. We can't extract ourselves out of these bad situations, whether they're living conditions, we should really move or get out of there, or jobs, we stay stuck in them too long, and forced relationships. And then we sabotage the good things that we've been granted, we sabotage them. We take them and destroy them, the good things. And the one good thing of my life, those years before BNA, I had this gig, and it was a creative thing, and I started it as a sidelight, but I was good at it. I discovered I was good at something. That was a shock right there. And I got clients, and clients referred clients, and I was popular as whatever I did. What I did is not important. And for a number of years, I was able to take those vacations, but I also went through my days during the day feeling like I'm okay. That's pretty good what I helped this person with and the way I put it in words. And then everyone went home, and the rest of my life was a desert. There were often no people in my life. And every night, after everyone went home, I got high. And in certain places of NA, we keep our particular drug of choice anonymous, and I'm going to choose to do that, except to tell you that my drug of choice allowed me to sleep it off and be functional the next day. And for 2 decades, this was my life. Hardly any social life, no friends, none that lasted. My work, getting high, repeat, rinse and repeat. Not much of a life. And I'll get into why that was my life. But what I'm getting at is I listen to these stories. I listen carefully, and I glean some things. And the other thing that's in our stories is everyone, if I listen carefully, everyone here probably, I don't know all of you, I don't know many of you, have something happened early in our life. Something that affected how we view the world, how we view ourselves, and a whole belief system that got constructed around that. And that changed our whole life, and in effect, it was a ticket to get to Narcotics Anonymous if we were lucky. What am I talking about? Well, if we were neglected as kids, if mom and pop were always working, or they just weren't giving us much attention, or if we were beaten regularly or occasionally, we're kids. What do we make of this? We don't know what other parents do to kids, but our parents are supposed to love us. We know that much. Or they said in a weak moment, they said this, and they said it once, but it had a great effect if they said those terrible words, "We wish we never had you." We hung on to that, and we were deeply affected by that. And it was easy it was easy as kids to try to make something of this situation that didn't make sense. Our parents supposed to love us, and they did these things or said that thing. We're kids. We don't have the wherewithal to process. We can't say Mom had a bad day. We don't understand that. We don't understand that parents wanted to control us, so they beat us, and thinking that would be we can't process this. So what we made out of it and what we lived by from that point on for decades is, I'm not lovable. They treated me that way. I'm not lovable. I'm a piece of crap. I'm not lovable. Or, here's another variation. If we were raised by people that were not our parents, grandparents, foster parents, an aunt, an uncle, something like that, we learn from what's around us that that's not the usual thing. And we're grateful for grandma and grandpa or whatever. Or we have our parents, they're living with us, and we have the big game coming up on a certain night in a certain place, or a performance, or a dance, whatever, and Mom and Pop don't show up. And that has impact. Or maybe it's simply they say from time to time, why can't you be more like your cousin or your sibling or the kid next door? Why you're comparing me and you're saying I fall short? What do we make of that? I'm not important. And we go through life with the belief system that we're not important. And it shows up in our relationships and our interactions and so on. Here's a third variation. Third grade teacher's having a bad day. We don't have an answer for one of the questions, and he or she says, "You're stupid." Or our first girlfriend or boyfriend breaks up with us. And on her way out, her parting shot is, "And besides that, you're ugly." She said, "I'm ugly. I guess I'm ugly." Teacher said, "I'm stupid. I guess I'm stupid." Or somebody says to us, the parents say to us, "You'll never amount to anything." And we take that in and we believe this stuff, and it influences all our decisions and our choices for decades. Doesn't go anywhere. Wertheimer White calls them self-defeating patterns. Stepworking Guide says unresolved pain, the pain of hearing those words or being beaten or unresolved, and we're going through life, and it's not good. So the one that hit me the most was the third one is being stupid and not amount to anything is a way of saying I'm handicapped or I'm lacking. I don't have what other people have. That was my story because I was brought up with this expression. Only your family loves you, little Philip, but when the time comes when you go out in that world, it's very different, little Philip. My mother and my mother's family all believed that fervently, and one at a time they came at me through my childhood, that when the time comes, there's something out there that is, I was going to be afraid. It sounds scary, doesn't it? And when I got out in the world, I had a hard time. I was always uncomfortable around people. Always. I observed how they interacted, and they seemed very spontaneous and comfortable. And I can't make small talk. I can't make eye contact. I look like a deer in the headlights is my expression on my face. And mostly I'm aware of, I don't know what to do with my hands. And so I looked like I was scared. You know, we're chameleons, and we should be able to cover that up. I couldn't do it. And so at one point I tried. I stood in front of a mirror and practiced walking confidently, and then tried to remember how that felt when I got around people, and it didn't work. See, my goal was not to try to fit in, not to try to be part of. That was aiming too high because I thought I was a piece of crap. I just wanted to not stand out. Don't notice me. My goal was to be invisible. That's a heck of a goal. To not be noticed is the best I can hope for. But it was. It was. And so I had this life at some point where I did this work that was very fulfilling, that did raise my self-esteem. But when everyone went home, I had to get high to cover that up. And that was my life, along with those dangerous vacations. So at some point, I got a brilliant idea. You know about those. I was getting high after work all those years, and somehow I thought it wouldn't matter. I had some breaks during the day. If I got high during the day, and I still had clients coming in afterwards, and I hadn't slept it off. And guess what? One by one, I lost clients. They saw a difference. I'd been doing it so long, I figured I could just go through the motions, automatic pilot, and they wouldn't notice my brilliant thinking. But they noticed. And at the end, there were no clients. I had destroyed this thing that gave me the only bit of self-esteem I had, because I had this unhealthy and untrue belief system, which is what I described. So, I had nothing to live for. I had no social life. I attempted it a number of times, but I was bullied and ridiculed because I didn't look comfortable, and I guess that made other people uncomfortable enough to make fun of me. They did imitations of me. And so I withdrew from the world. And then I tried again, and the same thing happened, and I withdrew from the world for longer periods of time. And at the end, all I wanted to do is not to be noticed. Go on with what you're doing, pretend I'm not here, not to welcome people in, not to want people to be part of my life. I gave up on that, and it just seemed impossible. I remember at the time, Barbra Streisand was singing about people who need people. And I would hear that song and realize I was not one of those people that need people. That didn't apply to me. When it got bad enough, and when I had been planning my suicide, not just planning it, I had the means necessary back in my apartment. That was scary too, that it was becoming real. And 5 blocks away from where I had been living all those years was a clubhouse. And at times I would take walks and pass by the clubhouse and hear people laughing and applauding, and I would know what that clubhouse was about. That was for those people. Isn't it nice that those people have a place to go? And lo and behold, I discovered I was one of those people. And I walked into a Narcotics Anonymous meeting not knowing anything about how this works. I did hear through the media that there was a movement in the 80s, a Just Say No movement, and I knew that was not what I was looking for. At first I didn't believe it could work, but if I knew I had issues, I knew it, and I was looking for some place that worked on what got us here, what made us use the way we used, and risked everything, and what was something that would work on our issues. And I heard there was something called step work, and there was a process here, and that made me come back initially. And yet, it was 1992, the height of the crack epidemic in New York City, the height of it. Everyone was sharing about crack, doing invitation about what happens to them now. And that's what people would do. Everyone would laugh, and what are they laughing about? There was a lot like that, and there were reasons for me to feel this appeals to me. I like hearing the shares, and I don't know if I was able to identify with the issues yet. It was still, the stories were kind of different, but I kept coming. I didn't, there was no path. There was no path that would say, I'm going to learn how to identify, and then I'll hear the themes, and they're sharing, and they'll be... No, that came later, but... So I was uncomfortable around people. I sat in the back behind a post. In New York, we invite the newcomer, come and sit in the intensive care section in the front. And I would wave them off. No, I'm comfortable in the back. Go on with whatever it is you do here in Narcotics Anonymous. Leave me alone. Don't. That was just the wrong thing. But they were trying, and they came up to me and introduced themselves and asked my name. And I messed it up from the beginning. I made up a name. For no reason. I made up a name, and as I kept coming, they called me by that name, and I answered to it. And that went on for a while, until I got the courage to straighten that out. So for me to be comfortable in a room full of people was a real challenge. I had isolated so much, and I chuckled to myself when some of you would talk about you isolated, because I don't believe anyone did it as thoroughly as I did. But I did a lot of comparing. What helped me was I sort of fell into service. I got there early, and I saw people putting out chairs, and how do you do it, and so on. And sooner or later, I went to a business meeting, and they wouldn't let me alone. Anyone at the business meeting doesn't yet have a position. We do something about it. But I'm new. That it will waive your clean time. So I did stuff like GSR right at the beginning. Went to a GSR meeting. The whole of Manhattan sent GSRs, and I'm one of them. And then I came back and made my report, and I had to talk to my group for a number of minutes about what I heard and try to explain. It was all very helpful because it was a set task. It wasn't personal yet. I wasn't ready to get personal. So service helped me a lot, just break the ice. But I'm sitting there in meetings, and maybe you did this too, and you hear stuff that is amazing and, to me, at that point, not believable. For example, you said, newcomer, we're taking away your drugs. You're trying to stay clean, right? We're taking away your drugs. That drug that medicated your feelings, so you're going to go through feelings. And any day you feel something uncomfortable, do this to let us know what's going on with you. Talk about to someone. And they said you can do it during the meeting, raise your hand and share about it. You can do it on the phone. You can do it after the meeting, pull someone over. And then they said, after you tell us what's bothering you, you will be bothered less by that, or it'll go away. I'm saying, man, how can that happen? Where does it go? What are you talking about? If you talk about what's bothering you to someone, or a group, or on the phone, however you want it, you won't be bothered. One day I was having a bad day. I was hurting about something. I don't remember what. And it's after the meeting, and this didn't make sense, but I was going to try it and prove it didn't make sense. And I pulled over this member who I could tell was relatively experienced member, and I said, "Have you got a minute?" Well, it took much longer than a minute. When I got started, and he was listening, there was people around us in distraction, but he was listening like a laser beam. And I'm telling him about what happened on the day, and this happened, and then I went over there, and this happened. He's listening. It was a new experience. Somebody so focused on me, and I'm going on and on and on, and now I'm feeling better. And what made it really strange is I said to him, "Thanks a lot. You really helped me a lot." And he said, "No, thank you. You really helped me a lot." I really believe Narcotics Anonymous was a strange place. I watched what happened in meetings, and people as new as me, I knew they came in right when I came in, and they said as much, and we raise our hand in New York, and we get picked, and then we could share. You do it differently, and so do lots of other places. So these guys were raising their hand, and they were going on and on for 5 minutes. You get to share. And at one point, I tried it, and I got picked, and I got so nervous. And I said my name, which was not even my name. And nothing would come out. There was a moment of silence, like before the Serenity Prayer. For maybe 30 seconds, and I gave up, and I said, "Thanks for letting me share." And people said, "That's all right. That's okay." Well, I did that a number of times, and these people as new as me were going on and on, like sharing like Shakespeare, my sponsor said. Again, what's wrong with me? I'm lacking, I'm handicapped, fed into my faulty belief system. And I wanted this enough that I tried to figure out what I could do. And so I would raise my hand, and they would pick me, and I'd get nervous, but I would say that name, and then I would say, "You told me to tell you what's going on with me. What's going on with me is I'm having trouble sharing. I'm practicing. Thanks for letting me share." And they thought that was wonderful. That was wonderful. I didn't understand, but I appreciated the warmth and the support. And after a while, I was able to string some sentences together. And after a while, you couldn't stop me talking like now. I kept hearing about this thing called an HP, a higher power. We had the steps and traditions on that people copied onto a sheet. We didn't have the printed ones back then. People took the trouble. They took one of their bed sheets and the steps, and there was this higher power mentioned up there. And I thought, oh no, that's part of the deal? Oh no. I had never believed in anything. I was brought up that way, and I had lived a number of decades that way, and I couldn't see the path. Hear what I'm saying, newcomer? There was no apparent path. But I kept coming. And I got to talk openly about, I don't believe I can do this if you need a higher power. This thing you're talking about, I don't believe it. And experienced members would come up to me and say, "You keep coming," and they said the same 3 words, "You'll find something." And they would be proven to be right. By the time I got to a second step, because I stayed and did step work, I collected evidence and I had no explanation how it happened. And I got something that I could work with and build. So I had these doubts about a higher power, and one of the members took me over to a window and he said, "Phil, do you see that tree out there?" I see the tree. "Yeah, what about it?" He said, "Do you see that the wind is moving the branch of the tree?" Yeah, I guess that's, no. He says, "Can you see the wind?" And he was opening my mind to the fact that spirituality is not about religion necessarily. It's about a belief in the supernatural. I got that from the dictionary too. Supernatural. But that's what he was introducing me to something. And the supernatural is anything we can't see, smell, taste, or touch. We can't explain it. Literature says, we can't say it adequately in words. So that opened my mind. And the care he took to take me over to the window, I was so appreciative of that. The way we do things here is very moving to people like me and like you that never got that kind of attention or consideration or caring. This paying close attention to caring. So I carried a reservation for a number of months, and finally in a meeting I raised my hand and told about the drawer full of stuff that was still in my apartment that I hadn't thrown out. And people were alarmed, paraphernalia in there. And they were alarmed, and they said, "Phil, you gotta throw that stuff out." And I came back to that same meeting a week later because I was unable to do it. I just stared at the drawer, and that didn't solve the problem. And I told them I couldn't do it. And at the end of the meeting, there was a circle around me, and they said, "How can we help?" And I don't know how I got to say this, but I said, "Come with me to my apartment." 2 carloads of recovering addicts came with me, and they held the plastic bag, but they made me empty the drawer, and they took the plastic bag and dropped it in a dumpster or something, and I was rid of my reservation. But to have 2 carloads of people stop what they're doing and take more caring, the caring we do for each other. We're trained to care for each other, and it can be incredibly moving, and it can dissolve the doubts that most of us have at the beginning. And finally, there was a period in that early period, where I would sit in meetings, and suddenly I would be sobbing. I would be crying, and I'd stifle the sound because I didn't want to disturb the meeting, but my body would shake in, and there'd be a hand on my shoulder from somebody sitting behind me. And the tears were not attached to somebody sharing something sad. There was plenty of that too. But they were just tears. And it seemed like every day for those couple of weeks, I was crying in meetings. And I realized later I wasn't losing my mind. That was my first thought. Those were tears of joy. Because I got to a point, enough of my doubts were dissolved and resolved, and I was so grateful to be here and to have found my tribe and to have the feeling that you might understand me and that you're enough like me that this is where I belong. And when we finally find out where we belong, that's a wonderful moment. Now, the problem is still my belief systems, what I made out of those childhood experiences. And your experiences may be different. I gave you some selection there. But my childhood experiences of, first of all, hearing that when I get out in the world, it's different than family, implying that it's probably difficult, and maybe, little Philip, you don't have what it takes to handle that. Maybe they were giving me a heads up, and they were trying to do a good. But what I got out of that is I'm incapable. I'm lacking. I don't have what it takes. And on top of that, my mother overprotected me to an extreme degree. I mean, I was taken to school and called for right after school, brought back home, kept in the house. I couldn't go anywhere all the way up to my teens. I couldn't go out of the house and walk down the street without her or some adult member of the family. I couldn't play with the kids next door, kids my own age next door. I was just restricted in all these ways. It was like being under house arrest. I spent a lot of time in my room and being under surveillance all the time. That was my childhood. And so I believed what other people have, I don't have those faculties, those capabilities. And I needed to do some work to resolve my unresolved pain and my self-defeating patterns. I like the way it works, Helen Wise says it. It says that though painful and sad, the past cannot be changed. But our warped beliefs about ourselves can be changed. And we change them by working steps. Living Clean says the work we do in the steps will help us figure out whether our beliefs still work for us. We take what we need and we decide what to keep and what to get rid of. But how do you get rid of this lifelong belief system? The lie is that, what can I do about my personal belief system that has led me astray, that has made me feel inadequate and lacking and a piece of crap, that made me not choose the wrong people and choose the wrong places and the wrong things and make bad decisions. So I have three basic belief systems that got to go. One is I had no social skills. Another is I had no friends that stuck around, so I had no relationship skills, and they're different than social skills. And the third one is this stormy and strange relationship I had with my mother. Because when I finally went out in the world and tried to cope and was living on my own, I had very little to do with my mother. And when I interacted with her, I said harmful things. I said things that hurt her, probably. She wouldn't show it, but I said things that, and I do things. And do you ever have those moments where you acted out a certain way and you say, where did that come from? What did I just do? I had those kind of things. I was really hostile toward her, and I didn't understand, and I had to do step work. So first the social skills thing. In the fifth step, I identified that I didn't feel good about myself, and I'd had all these bad experiences. And in the sixth step, I had to identify what defect is that makes me be in a room full of people and automatically feel uncomfortable. What is that? It certainly looked like almost everybody else felt comfortable, but there I was. And it never changed all those years, all those experiences. And the usual defects that we hear about were not adequate. I had to find what described the essence, because that's what the defect is, not the behavior. It's the essence, what's underneath that behavior that we call a defect. We have ways of dealing with that, and I came up with the word intimidation. I was intimidated by roomfuls of people. was intimidated. I got automatically frightened. And in the 7th step, we practice the spiritual opposite. Yes, we pray to whatever our higher power is, but we must change our behavior, make the attempt of changing the behavior, even if it's the external. Even if we're acting as if, doesn't matter. We're trying to change the outward, the apparent behavior. And we need a certain spiritual opposite to keep in mind to allow us to do that. The spiritual opposite of intimidation would be, anyone know? Courage, yes. So I'm in the 7th step and I'm practicing courage. And one of the ways it showed up was when there would be a confrontation and I would people please and sweep it under the rug and find something to be agreeable about. We'd never deal with issues. And I practiced going through confrontations. Had nothing to do with my liking it. I didn't like it, but I realized it was necessary. And I got to be able to have confrontations and get through them and feel pretty good about getting through them. And in the 9th step, part of my amends to myself was I had to admit that I really need people. I really need people. That was a defense. I like the people in NA. I'm making friends now. I really do need people, and I deserve having people in my life, damn it. And so I was acquiring social skills and all the practice of being in meetings and those interactions. Relationship skills, I said, was different, and I can be oversensitive. I was back then, and the opposite in 7 to that would be open-minded. You know, things were not intentionally meant to hurt my feelings. I'm just feeling that way. Maybe they just said it. Maybe they don't know how sensitive I am, and the opposite being open-minded. There are other possibilities besides someone is out to hurt me. There really are. Amazing. And I have control issues, and we do things in NA meetings and in business meetings and so on, and I went through a period where I felt I know the right way to do this. What's the matter with you? Why won't you do it the way I'm telling you to do it? And I had to practice tolerance, respect for the beliefs and practices of others. Respect. It was being disrespectful, thinking, do it my way. What's wrong with you? And in 10, I developed the ability to do something unthinkable. Admit I was wrong. Admit it. Just admit it. The ceiling won't fall in, the ceiling won't fall in, the floor won't open up if I admit I'm wrong. Oh, no big deal. And I got in the habit of consciously exposing situations outside in the world where I fell short. Like the time I got kicked off a Greyhound bus because I was behaving badly. It was late at night, and he's reading the format that drivers have to read, and I want to go to sleep, and I'm calling out things, and he stopped the bus and said, "You have to get off. There's a federal law that says I can do this." And I began sharing that and other embarrassing experiences that weren't that embarrassing once I put them in words and people understood. And I was freed. I got the freedom of not having to hide my shortcomings in the 10th step. And in the 11th step, one of the things about the bad belief system is we choose the wrong people. I was choosing people as insecure as me and as ill-equipped to be in a relationship as I was all those years. And I learned to watch who's put in my path. What people are sort of showing interest in me, or that for some reason I keep bumping into them in different situations. Maybe I meant to take a really good look at them and maybe include them in my inner circle. And so I began to have better relationships because I was choosing better. And that part of my belief system I could let go of. And then the relationship with Mom, I wrote about her in the 4 Steps. She was the star of the show in the 4 Step of mine. I have a lot to say about her. And I also talked about those moments where I suddenly said something very hurtful. She wanted to spend a lot of time with me. I was an only child, and I wasn't going to spend time with her. I was in the city ripping and running, and that was my priority. I moved into the city. I shared about that, and at the end of this 5th step, we get the exact nature. We listen to our sponsor, right? And he had taken notes, and he said, "Phil, you were punishing her." Oh, yes, I guess that's what I was doing. That thing, where did that come from? That's where it came. Oh, some of the truths that are revealed are uncomfortable truths. So in the 6th step, I identified self-pity involved with my relationship with my mother. Why did I happen to get that pick? Other people have mothers that treat them better and are not so restrictive. And I began to be self-supporting as the opposite of that. As you see, 6 and 7 were very pivotal in my recovery. Maybe they'll be in yours. I began to be self-supporting and not self-pity, and understand that this was the mother I got, and it's my job to find a way, even though she had passed before I got here. I meant to mention that. She had passed, so there were no direct amends possible, and I had to find another way of thinking about her. And here's where it came in the 8th step. My sponsor said, "You're not ready to go to the 9th step because you're still blaming her for how she brought you up. I want you to think about what you know about your mother before you were born." Before I was born, I had been so self-obsessed that all I thought about was my needs, and there were snippets of her life that were revealed, and I had to rack my brain and find out. She was a widow twice before being that old, and her life was kind of tragic, but that wasn't the thing. The thing that I remembered that made the difference was this. She had had a miscarriage before me with my father. She had had a miscarriage, and I got to talk to women in the program that had had miscarriages. And what is it? What about that? What's that experience? And each of them said they had to work on not feeling guilty. Well, my mother and the whole family she came from didn't work on anything. So she was feeling what she had felt, when she had the miscarriage, and it was an unresolved issue in her life, and it began to make sense how she brought me up. That's why she was overprotective. Oh, that's what she didn't want me out of her sight, because something bad might happen to me. If I had a cold, it was like I had a terminal disease. She made so much of it. I couldn't cross streets, and it was a small town with no traffic. It didn't make sense, but now it made sense. She was overprotecting me because she didn't want to feel the loss she felt when she had the miscarriage. And because it all made sense, instead of feeling resentful and antipathy toward her, I felt all kinds of love for her. And when I went to the gravesite, I was able to read the letter and get so much relief. So the sum total of all this is, once we recognize that systems need to have the same depth that the old lie had, and there are ways to work on that. Whatever yours is, there's a way to work on it, and rid yourself of those faulty belief systems. Living Clean says that the process offers the freedom to choose what to bring forward and what to leave behind, and we can use that freedom and have wonderful lives. Today I have this wonderful life that allows me to make meetings in places like here, and I can just go, and I can be comfortable around you people. You're saying something that I'm not nervous up here. I am comfortable. Imagine who I used to be and how far I've come, all because of the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And I'll just close with this. And maybe I'll be controversial, I don't know. All of this, all of my growth is what I've described, and it's all from the Narcotics Anonymous program. You will not hear me talk about outside help, even if I went, which I haven't, but if I did, you would not hear me talk about in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting about outside help, because it's not carrying our message. We can check some things at the door we're supposed to, and there's this new, I call it an epidemic, of sharing about outside help in our meetings and not honoring the NA program by keeping it pure for the newcomer.
Yes.
I can't imagine what I'd be thinking today, sitting in meetings where it's frequent. It's not a rare thing. It's this outside help and using terminology from other things. We wouldn't allow that about religion. We'd be very upset with that. But it's an indirect endorsement, and it hurts Narcotics Anonymous, in my opinion. And my growth is all about the NA program and the process. Even when I wrote the words, the process, in some of my notes I take, it's with a capital T and a capital P, because I honor it so much, and I believe so fervently in that what we do here can transform anyone's life that has come here and make you feel good about yourself. You're not a piece of crap. You are enough. And first we'll believe it, and if you do the work we do here, you'll believe it too. Thank you. Thank you for listening.